We tell ourselves a simple story. Civilization began with cities, with bricks and markets, kings and temples, laws written on clay. But what if that's not where it really starts? What if our story begins in a world with no cities, no writing, no monuments at all? A world of ice and darkness and small bands of humans following herds across a frozen earth. A world where fire was Wi-Fi and the only social network was the circle around the campfire at night. This is the world before history. The lost world of the Ice Age humans. 20,000 years ago, Earth was locked in the grip of an ice age. Glaciers taller than skyscrapers smothered North America, Europe, and Asia. Seas were lower, coastlines were different. Continents were connected by land bridges, now buried beneath the waves. Where there are cities today, there were walls of ice. Where there are highways, there were herds of mammoths, bison, wild horses, moving like living storms across endless grasslands. The wind cut like knives. Nights lasted forever. For most animals, this world was a prison. But for one species, it was a test. And somehow, that species was us.
We like to imagine we were alone. One human species,
one inevitable destiny. But the Ice Age was crowded. In Europe and Western Asia, thick-boned Neanderthals were already masters of the cold. Strong, stocky, intelligent, with brains slightly larger than ours. In the East, a mysterious cousin we now call the Denisovans left only a few bones and a ghost in our DNA. Far to the south, other human lineages had already come and gone, their stories mostly erased by time. And somewhere in Africa, our own species, Homo sapiens, was still just one experiment among many. We were not the chosen ones. We were the survivors. For tens of thousands of years, the planet wasn't ruled by us. It was shared. Campfires flickered under different stars, different faces warmed their hands over the same flames, and none of them knew which lineage would still be here at the end of the ice. So how do you stay alive when winter is the default setting of the world? You don't build skyscrapers. You build skills. Ice Age humans were engineers with no blueprints. They shaped stone into blades sharper than steel, points that could drop a mammoth or pierce the hide of a woolly rhinoceros. They tanned hides into clothing, stitched with bone needles finer than some we use today. They built shelters from mammoth bones, stacked like ribs of a fallen god, covered in skins, warmed by fire and body heat. Every object had to justify its weight. If you carried it across a frozen continent, it either kept you alive or it stayed behind in the snow. There were no supermarkets, no days off. Food meant hunting or watching someone you love go hungry. And yet, in the middle of all this struggle, they made room for something else: beauty. Deep inside caves, far from daylight, they painted. On rough stone walls in places like Lascaux and Chauvet in France, ancient hands drew herds of horses, bison, lions, mammoths. Not stick figures, but living, breathing animals captured in motion. The pigments were carefully mixed. The walls were chosen for their curves so that in torchlight the animals seemed to move. These were doodles. They were cinema before cameras existed. Around the same time, someone picked up a piece of ivory and carved a tiny figure or strung teeth and shells into a necklace. These objects didn't keep you warm. They didn't fill your stomach. They filled something else. Whatever human means, it was already there, kneeling in the dark, turning memories into art as ice groaned outside. And where there is art, there are stories. We will never know the words spoken around those fires, but we can guess the themes. Where did we come from? Why do we die? What waits beyond the snow? The Ice Age wasn't just about survival. It was also about grief. When archaeologists find Ice Age graves, they don't just find bones. They find bodies carefully placed, sometimes covered in red ochre, surrounded by tools, beads, antlers, gifts for a journey somewhere else. A child buried with a carved animal, a hunter buried with his spear. These are not the customs of creatures who think death is the end. Somewhere in that frozen world, someone looked at a body and thought, "This is not all of you." And from that moment on, we were no longer just animals. We were storytellers, trying to negotiate with the dark.
Eventually, the ice began to melt. Glaciers retreated.
Seas rose. Forests spread into places once crushed by snow. Herds changed their paths.
Some vanished forever, and the people of the ice followed the warmth. On the shores of new lakes and rivers, someone planted the first seed on purpose. Someone stayed in one place a little longer than usual. Tents became huts, camps became villages, and one day, villages became cities. We like to call that moment the birth of civilization. But cities were not the beginning. They were an answer to a question asked long before, whispered in caves, painted on stone, and carried across ice on tired shoulders. Today, we live in towers of glass and steel, surrounded by machines, glowing screens, endless noise. But under all of it, the Ice Age human is still here. In the way we gather around glowing rectangles, the way they gathered around fire. In the way we tell stories about heroes and monsters under a different kind of sky. In the way we still look up at the stars and feel very, very small. We are not separate from those people. We are those people, with better jackets and worse attention spans. The lost world of the Ice Age humans isn't really lost. It's printed in our DNA, hiding in our fears, our dreams, our need to turn survival into meaning. If this journey into the deep past made you feel that connection, that thin, fragile thread between us and them, leave a like, share this story, and subscribe for more forgotten chapters of our species. Because here on Epochlight, we don't just look at history, we remember the worlds that came before it.